What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is episode 83. Yes, we're up to 83 episodes. We're motoring along, and this is a special episode for the content that we're going to be covering very, very soon. We're going to be covering, as we do every single week, this week's AEW Dynamite and this week's NXT action from Full Sail. It's sandwiched in between those reports. We're also going to be announcing or formally announcing the categories for the end of year Pro Wrestling Awards. It's going to be hosted by Wrestling with Johners, and that drops on a special podcast episode on the 21st of December with my Twitter friends at Dits on Wrestling. A great podcast, a great YouTuber. He's been on the podcast before, and he's going to be helping us out with that special awards show. But the categories and nominations actually go live from today, so the categories will be announced in the middle of this show. And at the very end of the show, we've got a new feature that will become a regular feature on this podcast. It's going to be our 2-minute Brainbuster quiz, and our special guest host who's on the line, who I'll be introducing very, very soon, will be our guinea pig in this first ever 2-minute Brainbuster quiz. Essentially, it will be that our guest will get 2 minutes to answer as many wrestling-related questions correctly as possible within them 2 minutes. So that will be good fun, and we'll create a leaderboard with all of our guests on there and see how they're going to. I'm sure it will turn into a bit of friendly competition, a little bit of rivalry, and a little bit of competition. But we'll see how that goes. That will be a bit of a testing point towards the end of the show. But as I like to do at the beginning of every single episode, is to throw out our social media plugs. So you know where to find us, you know where to say hi and get in touch. Of course, we're on Twitter. You can find us on Twitter at withjohners_pod. That's at withjohners_pod on Twitter. On Instagram as well, just go out and search Wrestling with Johners. And of course, go out and search our fun, friendly, interactive Facebook community page. Just search Wrestling with Johners, and that's Johners spelled Johners. And of course, if you enjoy listening to this podcast, please don't forget to hit subscribe so that you can be notified every time a new episode drops. You can find Wrestling with Johners on all popular podcast platforms, including Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and of course YouTube. So please spread the word. Give us a follow on all of our social media pages, and subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channels today. And help to get even more people listening to the best kept secret in the world of wrestling podcasting, the Wrestling with Johners podcast. So, on to our special guest host. Every week I like to have a guest host to join in on the banter and all the lovely talk of AEW and NXT and whatever else is catching the headlines for the previous 7 days. And today I've got a special guest host. He actually got in touch via our Wrestling with Johners Facebook page. And I've got Grizz on the line. So Grizz, welcome to the Wrestling with Johners podcast, making your Wrestling with Johners podcast debut. Good afternoon. How are you, sir?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you very much for having me.
No, you're very, very welcome. You reached out to myself via Messenger, via Facebook after I put out a post looking for new collaborators, new people that might be wanting to get involved in the podcast, be a guest host, be a co-host, and you decided to throw your hat into the ring. What kind of prompted you to do that then, Graham? I understand you've got a bit of a history in podcasting yourself, I understand.
I do, yes. I used to run a podcast called Turning Heel Podcast with my good buddy. And basically it's, your average Scottish thing of sitting down and having a couple too many drinks and making arses of herself.
Sounds fantastic. I'll have to look it up. And you're not in the podcast game anymore, but you did that for a couple of years. But you've clearly been a wrestling fan for a long time. When did the wrestling bug kind of catch you? Do you remember the first time you caught a glimpse of professional wrestling and what you witnessed on your TV screen at a young age? Or when did you first come across professional wrestling, and when did it find you?
Well, I actually got into pro wrestling a little bit later than, a couple of the sort of more average fans. I got into it in 2002 properly, so I just missed like the Attitude Era and the Invasion storyline and whatnot. The first pay-per-view that I can remember was my friend came over, and he had recorded Royal Rumble 2000 off of the television when it used to be on Channel 4.
Yeah, good choice. Good choice.
Yeah, so that was my first like proper exposure to wrestling, and then from then I just kind of got into it back when Sky One used to show SmackDown on Saturday mornings.
Yeah. And you've obviously been following it ever since. So you've been on the journey now with professional wrestling for 17 years. So that's a good amount of wrestling fandom under your belt. And what sort of wrestling do you like to watch nowadays then, Grizz? Do you get the chance to view any in person? Do you get to go to any venues and watch any live wrestling? Or is it mostly via the TV? But what sort of wrestling kind of turns you on nowadays then?
Name the company and I'll probably watch it.
Really? So I know that we've messaged backwards and forwards and you've got a big list of wrestling that you keep on top of. And it's hard for me to cover as much wrestling as I do on a weekly basis. But you throw out AEW, obviously NXT, WWE, all the mainstream stuff. Any kind of independent stuff that you tend to watch on a semi-regular basis then, Grizz?
Well, yeah, I follow Stardom quite closely. A little bit behind at the moment, but like I've got like a kind of backlog. But it's nice to just kind of sit for like an evening and just like churn through a couple of their shows at a time.
Yeah, but I'm assuming that you're a regular viewer of NXT and AEW Dynamite, hence we're kind of covering both shows on this episode. But are they your bread and butter? Are they your go-to wrestling promotions nowadays?
Absolutely. Especially AEW. AEW has been nothing short of like excellent since it debuted.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to some good kind of reviews from yourself regarding this week's Dynamite, of course. But what in particular has kind of turned you on to AEW Dynamite and the product that they've been producing so far? I mean, they only announced that they were going to be a company at the beginning of January this year, of course. Their first official show was Double or Nothing in May. They've had a couple of pay-per-views and some kind of smaller shows since then. And, of course, they're into week 9 now of AEW Dynamite. But what do you love about the package of AEW as a whole then, Grizz?
Well, I like it because, well, first of all, it's because it's Kenny Omega, arguably one of the greatest wrestlers on the planet today. And so, any time that he shows up doing anything, it's like, right, well, that's me. I'm going to be following you over here now.
Yeah.
Cody, who's been obviously a massive name and really done quite a lot since he left WWE, so it's been interesting to kind of follow his career. And obviously with the Young Bucks and all that as well. But when they announced, when they started naming their roster and Chris Jericho and Pac showed up, and it's like, right, hold on a second, now we've got something.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what hooked a lot of people, to be honest with you. And they're two names that will feature in this week's episode, of course. And I have to agree with you. I've seen all of their stuff, seen all their pay-per-views. I've covered all of their episodes of AEW Dynamite. And it is stellar stuff. And I think it is filling the gap now for the lapsed wrestling fan, you could say, that's fallen out of love of WWE because of their family-friendly product, you could say. I mean, NXT to a certain degree is kind of filling that gap for the more traditional wrestling fan, but AEW is kind of a mixture of the modern and the traditional as well. It does tend to kind of take you back to what worked back in the 80s and the 90s, and there are kind of echoes of what worked 20-30 years ago, and mixing that with the modern wrestling, the modern names, and all the glitz and glamour that Dynamite's given us. So I'm enjoying the hell out of it, and yes, like I say, it's definitely proving successful so far. There has been some shots of the audience, one half of the audience kind of being a little bit bare or tarped off. Is that slightly worrying, being so early into their run, having their arenas kind of maybe half or maybe 2/3 full as opposed to completely sold out?
Yeah, because like the first couple of weeks they definitely like were running high on, oh, this sold out in like 5, 10, 15 minutes. And there were even like, a couple of those photos, as you say, coming out, and they were still claiming that this was a sold out show, and then you get the photo of half the arena being empty. I'm hoping more. It's just maybe, it's just not as exposed yet as it can be, and it might come over time. But I think like they seem to be doing well enough to that it won't be like a worry.
Yeah, and I'm where I've had this argument where NXT I think would benefit from going on the road, doing more arena shows, not necessarily like the Sia Centre, which they sold out on Saturday night, of course, 14,000 people. But I think if they were to do weekly shows in arenas like that, they would have a very similar response or result to AEW Dynamite, maybe have 5, 6, 7,000 instead of 10 to 14,000. I know that even Raw and SmackDown struggle to sell out the Sia Centre. I mean, if you live in Chicago, this last 7 days, Grizz, I mean, you've had a hell of a wrestling treat. Certainly, if you could afford it, you would have had. I think SmackDown was there on the Friday. Then you had NXT Takeover War Games on the Saturday, Survivor Series on the Sunday, Raw there on the Monday. There was a break for the wrestling fans that were still in town Tuesday, and then they Dynamite was there on Wednesday, of course. So a hell of a 7 days if you're a fan of Chicago. So no wonder, it would be almost impossible to sell out the arena for all 5 shows that I've just mentioned. But I'm wondering whether it might benefit AEW to look at their calendar and possibly pencil in some smaller arenas. Mm-hmm. To be honest with you, conversely, watching AEW, you wouldn't know that it wasn't sold out because the fans are so into it. The action's really, really hot. The fan noise is definitely there. The action of the drama is definitely there. So maybe it's not affecting the viewing audience. Maybe it's not affecting the people in the arenas. And like you say, maybe it could improve over time when they become more established, or maybe they will book in smaller arenas. But definitely very interesting to see anyway. And on the subject of Takeover War Games and Survivor Series, what did you think of both shows from last weekend?
Well, I ended up having a long weekend off of work, so I got to sit and watch them both live last weekend. So that was a really good start, and I think it very much helped with my enjoyment of the shows, because that was arguably 2 of the much better WWE shows that they've put on this year.
Yeah, agreed. And Survivor Series, I had it penciled as possibly my WWE pay-per-view of the year. Maybe Royal Rumble might just pick it, but I think the inclusion of having NXT on a main roster pay-per-view and the brand supremacy matches were absolutely stellar. I mean, personally, I felt that the Pete Dunne Adam Cole match was the best match of the night. I loved the men's 5-on-5-on-5. In my books, that possibly should have gone on last, knowing what we know now about the main events. And not that the women in the main event put a foot wrong. The match was good for what it was, but I think the fans were a mixture of being exhausted from having sat there through 2 hours of pre-show and then another 3.5 hours of main card. Many of them might have been at SmackDown or TakeOver from the night before, of course. So probably a little bit of burnout there, but I don't think they were quite into the action. And to be honest with you, I think Becky Lynch's popularity has dropped off quite a lot since WrestleMania. I think Bayley's heel turn hasn't really worked the way they intended, to be honest with you. She's almost gone from having this character that should have worked as a babyface, but unfortunately didn't, to having a heel persona that's definitely not working. So it's a downward step as far as I'm concerned. And but I did love the fact that Shayna was in that main event. I did love the fact that she won and kind of finished the show on the winning end. Didn't agree with Becky Lynch's kind of attack on her at the very end there. That kind of left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. But overall, I thought Survivor Series was an excellent show. What about yourself?
You know what? You pretty much hit the nail on the head with almost everything there. I fully agree that Becky's popularity has been going down, and it is almost starting to get to the point where it's like we feel the need to maybe take the title off her, because she's kind of like almost a title hog at this point. And then, as you say, Bayley's heel turn has just not gone the way that a lot of people were hoping, because, like, when Bayley first turned heel, I was ecstatic, because I was like, finally, like, this is something, because she's been needing something for a long time. Like, there was only so much left of the hugger character that she could have kind of got mileage out of, and I really quite enjoy the heel Bayley, but as in the character, but she is not very good on the microphone as a heel.
Yeah.
And I think that's very, like, you really need a good talker to pull off the kind of gimmick that she's doing now as a heel. And unless maybe they start having Sasha Banks being like Bailey's mouthpiece and Bailey like refusing to talk or something like that might help her a little.
That would work. I think that would work. And pairing up again on a more consistent basis with Sasha Banks. I mean, I thought they were good together as the tag team champions up until they lost the belts, and then Sasha went AWOL for however many months. But joining them together again as more permanent pairing, I think would definitely work and would benefit Bayley, definitely. But enough about the main roster, or certainly Survivor Series. Let's have a little look at this week's AEW Dynamite then. So this was week 9. And it was a really, really good show, stacked show, I think, leading into this week's episode of AEW Dynamite. Looking at the matches on offer, it looked almost pay-per-view quality, to be honest with you. I mean, they'd obviously advertised from last week a match that's been built over the last couple of weeks. Scorpio Sky going up against Chris Jericho, of course. You had the final of the, let's get this right, the Dynamite Dozen final, or however they were describing it, for this very expensive diamond ring that seemed to go up in value every 10 minutes. And so many other things, but more importantly, it was the kind of the Chris Jericho thank you celebration events which kicked off the show. And so you had Soul Train Jones, otherwise known as Virgil, or what was he known as in WCW? Was it Vincent or something like that?
Yes.
But Chris Jericho seems to be using Soul Train Jones more for comedy value. But this kind of got a bit of a chuckle out of me, especially when Soul Train was kind of reading from his notes and fluffing nearly every single line. I don't think he even got Chris Jericho's name out correctly, to be honest with you. But it was entertaining. I think it was meant to be entertaining. When Jericho comes out, he tells the fans in Chicago to sit down and to shut up. There's massive inflatable animals and characters all around the ring. There's boxed presents inside the ring, along with a portrait of himself or the Inner Circle. And Jericho tells us that tonight is a thank you, not from the fans, but it's meant to be a thank you from the AEW executives and the brass in the office. Jericho tells us that, or shows us, as a matter of fact, the official a little bit of bubbly alcoholic beverage. So I don't think we'll see this on the shelves in Tesco, to be honest with you, Grizz. But I know it's available on the AEW website. They plugged that enough throughout this episode. But I like the fact that they're capitalising off of, essentially Chris Jericho sitting in a hot tub drinking champagne and then making a meme out of it. So very good for them.
It took a lot for me to not order it when he brought up the website. I went on the website and had a look, and it was like,
oh, I'd love a bottle of that sitting on the table on Christmas Day. That would be hilarious. But he says it's made from the finest grapes from the side of a mountain in Nepal. So there we go. The Inner Circle then come down to join in on the celebrations. Sammy Guevara unveils a cardboard cutout of himself and Jericho hugging. Santana and Ortiz come out. They've got like a hamper of goodies for Jericho. Jake Hager even tries to come out. He attempts to get close to the ring with a goat, saying that he called the goat Chris Jericho. So I think, to be honest with you, that went down like a lead balloon. But like most of the segments, it was all for fun. It was all tongue-in cheek in that segment as well. Then we had Chris Jericho's dad come out of a box, who instantly became the biggest heel in the arena, instantly became the biggest heel of the night as a former New York Rangers ice hockey player in front of a Chicago crowd. So that was quite funny, and Jericho's dad definitely played his part very well there. Jericho brings in Justin Roberts to give Roberts the official statement from the AEW executives to read out, giving Jericho the thank you he deserves from the executives. However, Jericho wasn't happy with the way that Roberts read out the statement, and along with the Inner Circle, proceeded to beat down the ring announcer before SCU, dressed as part of the marching band. They rushed to the ring to make the save on Roberts, and of course further setting up Jericho's main event championship match against Scorpio Sky. So there was a lot that happened here, Grizz. This was a pretty entertaining opening 10 minutes. Give us your 2 pence worth on what happened here then, buddy.
Well, as I say, a little bit of bubbly.com. Like I was completely all over that. I thought that was amazing. And Chris Jericho, it's funny because it obviously works on like a couple of different levels, because Jericho being the greatest of all time, being a goat, and then naming the goat Chris Jericho.
And then, that was very funny, I must admit, yeah. It's a shame that the goat didn't want any of the action though. The goat wasn't having
no.
it. He didn't want any of the limelight. He wasn't having it. But that even got a chuckle out of Jake Hager, who's normally stony faced.
Yeah, it was just that part when there was the stagehand just literally pushing the goat's butt, and it's like, go on, goat. And then Jake Hager's just like, it's Chris Jericho. Never mind.
Yeah, but it worked. It definitely worked. And then we went into our first match of the night then, Grizz. The Best Friends versus the Lucha Bros. So I can vaguely remember these two having a match before on an episode of Dynamite, but maybe I'm just confusing it. A lot of these matches do seem to be quite repetitive from time to time, but this match was very good. So the action in this match started even before the bell rang as the Lucha Brothers attacked Best Friends on the outside. We even saw a cameo from Orange Cassidy dressed as a turkey. It was Thanksgiving this week in America after all, and he delivered a huge dive off the top turnbuckle onto the Lucha Brothers on the outside. The first half of this match saw Penta and Phoenix keep Beretta firmly in their corner as they were beating him down. Chuck Taylor eventually got the hot tag, dropping the Lucha Brothers with a huge senton over the top rope and to the outside. The Best Friends eventually get the surprise pinfall after Trent delivered his devastating crushing on Ortiz for the pinfall victory, no doubt helping them to improve in the tag team rankings. So this was a good match. I must be honest with you, I was surprised to see the Lucha Brothers lose, but we don't want obviously the same individuals, the same teams, the same wrestlers to win week in, week out. And it was good for the Best Friends to give them a little bit of a push, a little bit of a cameo, bit of fun action there from Orange Cassidy dressed as a turkey. So we had pretty much everything in this one. But what you're going to get from these four individuals is fantastic wrestling action. And it's quite a hot match for what it was. But give us your thoughts on what went down here then.
Oh, yeah. It was a great match. And again, agreed. I'm very surprised that Best Friends actually won. And this marks like the second time in a week that Trent has pinned one of the members of the Lucha Bros, because he defeated Pentagon on AEW Dark as well, which again was an absolute shock. And obviously coming out of this match next week, Trent is going to go against Phoenix. So can he pull off the threefer?
Yeah, can he pull off the hat trick? That would be pretty impressive. I'm kind of guessing, reading into the storyline that he possibly will, or some shenanigans will happen. But obviously setting up a good storyline there for the Best Friends. But an entertaining way to kick off the show, match-wise anyway. Then we went into a women's tag match.
Sorry, just before you go on.
Carry on.
Remember the commentator they brought in for this match?
Yeah. Well, I kind of remember him. I can't remember his name. I know that he didn't really contribute much, and he could have done with elevating his voice a little bit. But I'm sure making his debut, he was probably a bit nervous. But what was your kind of thoughts and feelings on that fella? I'm guessing they've got him kind of his name scored through any potential appearances he might make on AEW Dynamite in the future. But
maybe stick to Dark, yeah.
Yeah, maybe. But I know that Tony Schiavone is back next week, so I'm sure they'll be back to full force because God knows Excalibur needs to help. But not because of Excalibur's ability, but because of what he has to put up with Jim Ross. What's your feelings on Jim Ross as a commentator on AEW Dynamite? I know that his contributions have been mocked a little bit on social media, from myself included, dare I say. I think that he's maybe his style of commentary was more suited to 15, 20, 30 years ago instead of 2019. What's your feelings on JR in 2019 then, Grizz?
Well, you pretty much hit the nail on the head again there with Excalibur. Like, his back must be absolutely killing him for all the weight that he has to carry doing his job.
Oh, yeah.
And like, funnily you bring that up, because during this match there was a point where JR called Trent Taven for some reason, even though I don't think JR has been anywhere near Matt Taven at any point for him to get the two of them mixed up. And yeah, it was just the way he was like, oh, Taven with that move, and then Excalibur was just like, you mean Trent? And he's just like, yes, Trent.
Yeah, and it's like when Excalibur, says a move in Spanish, like the Tope con Hero or anything like that, and Jim Ross has to put his Oklahoma spin on it to what he might have referred to it as 20 or 30 years ago. But yes, like I said, I love JR to pieces. He'll always be up there as possibly the greatest commentator of all time. But I think he needs to take a sidewards or maybe a downward step and maybe let Tony Schiavone and Excalibur take the reins sometime in the future. I think, personally, and I hate to say this, I think that Jim Ross is possibly hurting the product as opposed to helping it.
Yeah. I think maybe he might need to be brought in for a few of the bigger matches because he has had good calls, like during the Kenny Omega and Dean Ambrose match. I would say like he was pretty much on the money with his commentary work there, but those are kind of guys that he knows a lot more, and like I guess kind of you got to think of it in this kind of way of he should probably know these wrestlers, before going on air, but this, like, he's brought into this company, and so he's having to learn a lot of brand new wrestlers he's never seen before on a very, very quick basis, and for a lot of people, that would probably be a very difficult task. So I guess I'm not trying to give him an out for some of the shoddy calls that he's had, but at the same time, I guess you kind of need to think of it in that way. It's like for someone, especially because he's an older person as well, it may be quite difficult for him to just see all these new wrestlers and try and keep up with everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with a couple of things you said there. Firstly, I think they should bring him out for the bigger matches. I think, put him in for main events, like when they used to wheel him out for big NXT matches when he signed again a few years ago with WWE, or big WrestleMania matches when they would kind of bring him out for big main event matches. But and I think they should do something similar, just save him for the big matches and maybe have him as a consultant backstage or as an executive or something like that, and so that it doesn't lessen his importance within AEW, I suppose. But I do agree. I think he does struggle with some of the more modern terminology, some of the more modern moves, and some of the newer wrestlers. I do want to echo your sentiment. I thought he was excellent during the non-sanctioned match at Full Gear from last month. I thought that his comment, it was very reminiscent of some of his classic calls when he's with WWE, the Moxley versus Omega match. I thought he was on top form there. But yes, I do think he's maybe a little bit of an embarrassment. I'd say 50% of the time, if that's kind of being generous, to be honest with you. But let's move on to our next match, and it was a women's tag match. Bea Priestley and Emi Sakura versus Hikaru Shida and Chris Statlander. So usually I butcher the Japanese names. I think I did quite well there, to be honest with you, Chris. I think I did okay. But in this match, Statlander impressed fairly early on with a moonsault off the ring apron and a missile dropkick. One thing that was noticeable was the distinct lack of crowd noise, certainly during the entrances and fairly early on in this match. I do think the crowd warmed up towards the end, most definitely. There's one spot in this match where Priestley was placed between the turnbuckles, and with Shida suplexing Emi Sakura into her own partner, with Sakura's boots appearing to catch Priestley quite hard. But that was quite a unique spot. So I've not seen a spot where somebody's been kind of wedged between the ring, the turnbuckles like that, and then her partner kind of suplexed on top of her. Statlander nearly gets the win for her team with her version of an Oklahoma roll. Sakura misses a moonsault. Statlander nearly has the match won with a huge facebuster and a scissor kick. However, Emi Sakura eventually gets the win for her team using the mic stand on Statlander, rolling her opponent up for the 1-2-3. So it was a good match. I've enjoyed the Joshi wrestlers in AEW. I do think that some of the wrestlers they're bringing in to bolster out the roster, like, for example, Chris Statlander has been a great addition to the women's roster. I'd like to see them use Nyla Rose a bit more, because I think that she is a fantastic prospect for the future for women's wrestling, and certainly in AEW. But I must admit, I do have some question marks over Brie Priestley. I think that she can be a little bit stiff sometimes, unnecessarily so. Or certainly that's the way it comes across, is her wrestling style is a little bit stiff. I'm not necessarily going to say sloppy, but definitely stiff, and she has been known to kind of catch one or two of her opponents fairly firmly in the past. But this match was very good. It built towards the end. The fans certainly got into it, and a bit of a, you could say, controversial end to the match, with Emi Sakura using her mic stand to help get to the end. But what were your thoughts on this one then, buddy?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. Obviously, three Joshi women, because as Bea Priestley wrestles for Stardom,
Correct, yeah,
and was their champion for a while, which broke my heart when that happened, because she defeated Kagetsu, who is absolutely one of my favorites there. But that's a story for another day. I really think that I love Emi Sakura. Like, I just find her so funny. And there was this one spot during the match where Hikaru Shida brought out the chair and was going to do like a running dive, and so she was getting ready to do it. She was getting ready to run, and then Emi Sakura just kind of sat in the chair and just pretended to drink tea. Yeah. And it was just like, oh, wee sweetheart.
That was good. That was funny.
And yeah, I will agree that probably Bea Priestley, I don't know if it maybe is because she wrestles quite a lot in Japan these days, that maybe she's sort of unintentionally developed a strong style, Japanese strong style. And maybe that's why it kind of comes off a bit rougher from her.
Yeah.
And with Chris Statlander, like, I don't really know too much about her. And I want to see, like, because she's got this gimmick of she's an alien or something. Mm-hmm. And considering how well they're doing these promo videos with the Dark Order, I want to see a kind of promo video that kind of fleshes out this Chris Statlander, the alien character, and like really make it mean something, because I find that there are wrestlers in AEW that get brought in and they're just kind of, them as a company, AEW, just kind of assume that everybody knows who these guys are, what they do, and what their gimmicks are. So they don't really feel the need to kind of flesh out characters. But if you're like, a lapsed fan that's just coming back to wrestling by watching AEW, and you don't know who these wrestlers are, you do kind of need a bit of explanation. Because if you sat down and watched this match and you were like, why do they keep calling Chris Statlander an alien? It kind of doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I've been calling for more video vignettes for months, if not years, both on WWE TV, AEW more recently. It's an easy way to introduce a character and leave them off telly for 2 or 3 weeks, so they can get these vignettes out, and then by the time they do make their debut, they'll be more well known. They'll have a character that people are familiar with, and they'll have a presence that people are going to get behind. And I have fond memories growing up in the early 90s of the Razor Ramon vignettes. I think they did Razor Ramon vignettes for possibly 2 months before they brought him in for his debut, and when he made his debut, he was already a rock star. He was absolutely fantastic. They did the same for many others over the years, and then it dropped off. They do it occasionally on NXT, and they do it occasionally on AEW, but with these more outlandish characters or newer characters, I agree they should do more of that type of thing. I mean, and for crying out loud, if we can have a dinosaur on AEW, we can definitely have an alien.
Yeah. And as you kind of mentioned, this was another like surprise ending, with Bea and Sakura winning, considering the fact that they were really pimping out Hikaru Shida being the top ranked female in the division. Yeah. And so like this is the kind of thing with AEW that I actually quite enjoy, is the fact that sometimes like when you're watching WWE and stuff, you kind of sit down and then you see the two wrestlers or a tag team or whatever ever in the ring, and you're just like, oh, well, we clearly know who's going to win this match. And then, lo and behold, it's the person you thought all along that wins that match. But with AEW, they do kind of keep you guessing a bit more, and it kind of makes a lot of these matches like a lot more intriguing in a way, because with AEW, it seems as if like, what you think is going to happen might not always happen.
Yeah, very true. That is noticeable, where you do get surprise winners and surprise finishes. But yeah, definitely enjoyed this one. Then we get a backstage video with Jon Moxley saying that he declares war on AEW, sending out a call to arms to anybody wanting to step up to be a hero or to be seriously hurt, as he described. After the commercial break, we then get the return of the American Nightmare Cody with more fireworks, and you can shake a very big stick at Grizz. They probably, I'd say they spent their budget on fireworks, but I know we had more fireworks throughout the night. And Cody only just getting medically cleared after his match with Chris Jericho at Full Gear, of course. And then Cody goes into a match with Matt Nix. So this is a squash or an enhancement match, you could say, featuring Matt Nix. Cody connects early on with a springboard cutter before applying his figure four leg lock. I say his figure four leg lock. I can't remember seeing him use it very often, but he gets the easy submission win here over Nix. After the match, Cody gets on the mic to call out MJF, telling him that they don't have to wait and they can go right at it. And now, but from the right hand corner of our screens, we then saw a mystery assailant come from within the ring, similar to what we used to see with The Undertaker or Kane, or now The Fiend, cutting a hole in the canvas and coming up through the ring. It turned out to be the Blade and the Butcher, who attack Cody along with Ali, or the Bunny, as she's now known as in AEW, from behind. It was a bit of a confusing segment, to be honest with you. It was kind of an attack out of nowhere. Now, my problem with this whole segment after the match went down was that nobody really knew who these guys were as they were coming from underneath the ring or through the ring. And it's yet another feud that Cody's involved with in 2019. Of course, he was involved in a big feud with his brother leading up to Double or Nothing in May. Then a big feud with Shawn Spears, and then going into his feud with Chris Jericho for that championship match at Full Gear. And then MJF, of course, MJF turned heel at Full Gear. You've got Wardlow thrown in there as well. Now these three, and in the space of less than 6 months, you've got about 4 or 5 different feuds there for Cody. So is there a fear that Cody could be spreading himself too thin as the lead babyface of AEW, being involved in so many kind of feuds that don't really last any longer than one match, and possibly dilutes Cody as a performer, or dilutes the importance of any feud he might be part of?
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. Like, I really like Cody.
Same here. Yeah,
I feel as if like it almost seems as if like all of Cody's kind of feuds need to be like really grandiose and everything. And I don't know. Because the way that they built up this MJF feud has been quite great, with the way that, you know, he has admittedly still been a heel, but he was still Cody's friend. So because he would still come out and make fun of the crowd and all that, but like, oh well, all you people are smelly and ugly, but I'm still Cody's best friend. And then people liked him because he was Cody's best friend. So when he properly turned heel, I was thinking that this could be a feud that can go on for quite a while, and it could always just be kind of one of those kind of things that are always, it will always be there. You know, they'll have their match or matches, and then they can be down the line, like say a battle royal or something like that, where the two of them will like face off in the middle of the ring, and you know, like JR or Excalibur could be like, I remember the feud that these two had at the end of last year, and just when Butcher and the Blade came out and attacked Cody, and it's like, well, like, we haven't even really gotten into this MJF feud yet, but yet now this tag team are attacking Cody, unless they end up joining MJF, and you know, MJF has his own like ran faction with Butcher, Blade, Ali, and Wardlow, is the kind of only way that I can see see this going right now. And
yeah, I agree. That could work. That could work.
Yeah, and as you said as well, the way that like nobody seemed to really know who they were. This was the same problem that they had with the Dark Order when they debuted.
Yeah,
was like it kind of harks back to what I said earlier. Whoa, sorry, my cat just jumped up on the down by. Sorry about that, my cat.
That's right. Carry on.
The desk.
I'll tell you what, animals love to make cameo appearances on my podcast because quite often you'll hear my two dogs downstairs going hell for leather if the postman turns up. So your cat is a more than welcome addition to the podcast. Don't worry about that.
They're the podcasts, as I like to call them.
Definitely.
So this kind of harks back to what I was saying earlier with the way that they bring in these people and just expect fans to know who they are. And sometimes that's not the best thing, especially since, like, people kind of only know the Butcher for being, Ali's husband, Pepper Parks, and they only know... wait, did I say that right? I think I meant the Blade, because the Butcher is the guitarist of Every Day I Die, and, like, that's kind of the only reason they know. Or it could be, Dr. Robotnik, from the look that he has.
Yeah.
But they keep bringing out these teams or these people, and they expect the fans to know who they are, and then they wonder why people don't react. And I only knew who they were because I used to watch this very short-lived wrestling company called Blackcraft, where they were quite big in there for the short run of that company. And that's kind of the only place I know them from. Or I think they work for Destiny Wrestling. But other than that, that's really been about it.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I've had no exposure to these two wrestlers prior to seeing them on AEW Dark. And that might be a little bit naive of me. Maybe I need to go out and search a few more indie wrestling companies than I do. But no, it was a bit of an education for me, I think. JR was just as much in the dark as anybody when they ripped their way through the ring. But let's say it's good because it adds to the tag team roster. And I think the tag team roster and tag team action in AEW is probably as hot as anywhere in the world right now, which is definitely one feather they've definitely got in their cap. But a little bit confused as to how this intertwines with the MJF feud, and no doubt MJF and Cody, they're still on a path to meeting each other one day in the ring. But I like the idea of these two, Butcher and Blade and Ali, maybe getting involved in some kind of faction with MJF and Wardlow, because if you remember from a couple of weeks ago, MJF kind of turned down Chris Jericho's offer to join the Inner Circle, and I wondered if that's because he had bigger things in mind for a faction of his own, possibly. So very interesting. I'm sure all will become apparent very, very soon, Grizz. But let's talk about our next match anyway. And on paper, you would expect this to kind of main event any arena in the world, and here it is on an episode of Dynamite. So lucky for us fans, I suppose. And it was billed as a rematch from AEW Full Gear, which happened in August, if I'm not mistaken. And it was Pac, or the Bastard Pac, as they like to announce him as, versus Kenny Omega. So Pac is the new number one contender, or at least he was a new number one contender prior to this match, according to the AEW rankings. And he goes up against his all-out opponent, Kenny Omega, of course. Omega comes out of the gate with a brutal Snapdragon suplex, a buckle bomb, and a sit-out power bomb for a close near fall. This match was fast and furious, as you would expect from these two, with Pac connecting with a moonsault from the top turnbuckle down onto Kenny Omega on the outside. Kenny launches Pac into the corner with a huge kick that kind of snapped Pac's head against one of the turnbuckles before getting a 2 count from a Fisherman Buster. Pac himself gets a close near fall from an avalanche Falcon Arrow, but misses his Black Arrow. Pac reverses the one-winged angel from Omega, but Omega turns Pac over into a crucifix pin for the 1, 2, 3. So this certainly was a fun and fast-paced match, as I explained earlier on. A little bit disappointed, I have to say, that they had this kind of blow-off match on an episode of Dynamite. It certainly pay-per-view quality. If they wanted to have a rematch between these two, they could have held off until the next pay-per-view, unless they haven't got one planned for a little while. I know they announced that they're just doing 4 pay-per-views a year, but also a little bit disappointed to see Pac take the pin after having such a great run up until this match. But it was a great match between, two of the best hands in AEW. But I'd love to know your take on this match between Pac and Kenny Omega.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It obviously wasn't as good as their pay-per-view match, for obvious reasons, being that this was a television match. But it was incredible, the speed that they were going at, and there was the avalanche Falcon Arrow off the top rope that just looked incredible. And I've always loved the Red Arrow, now called the Black Arrow, but just every time he pulls that out, it's still a move that you kind of go, wow, when you see it. Because
you can't get bored of seeing that. It's one of those moves that it has to be seen to be believed. And I was always disappointed when Pac was in the WWE and when they toured the UK that I never got to see Pac in person or perform the move in person. That was one thing that I was always looking forward to, or hoping to see as a live wrestling fan, and I never got to see that move performed in person. One day, you never know. But please continue.
Yeah. And I like the way that Kenny won with a sort of roll up. So it was the kind of way of being able to keep like Pac strong by just getting caught with a roll up, and it gives Kenny Omega a win, because let's face it, Kenny Omega hasn't really had that many victories recently, which is admittedly quite surprising. But also, I think the main reason that they had Pac lose here was because he's still got quite a good record when it comes to his record in AEW. But since, obviously, spoilers for the main event, they seem to be going with Dean Ambrose next, and they kind of have similar records. So I think maybe they were kind of wanting to have Pac be a bit lower on the the rankings. Thank you. So that it gives more justification to Moxley being the next number one contender for the championship.
Yeah, it makes sense. I hadn't thought about it that way, but when we get to the end of the match, it would make a lot more sense than what you've just said, most definitely. But a great match, and one that if you haven't seen this week's AEW Dynamite, definitely go back and catch that match for sure. Then we get a match, MJF accompanied to the ring by Wardlow, of course, going up against the Hangman, Adam Page. Now, this was the final of the Dynamite Diamond Ring match. I don't know if they called it anything other than that, but it was essentially the final 2 competitors from last week's Dynamite Dozen Battle Royal, which I enjoyed the hell out of. I thought it was a really fun Battle Royal with MJF and Adam Page being the final 2 in that match, leading to this match here. So we're informed that the Dynamite Dozen and the match for the Dynamite Ring will become an annual event. However, it's still not 100% clear on the privileges that the winner or the wearer of this very expensive diamond ring will be granted. Any thoughts from yourself here, Grizz, on what benefits the winner of this ring will have in the short or even the long term, maybe?
Well, this is the kind of thing that I was hoping that they were going to announce when they had this match. Was like, it seems as if the ring doesn't have any purpose other than, its constant rising of how expensive it is every 5 minutes.
And it was a hell of a ring when it got presented at the end. It was a decent sized ring, I tell you.
Oh yeah. And considering it's MJF that holds it, he should use that as a weapon now. Because
maybe
that'll make a hell of a dent in your head. Speaking of dents, actually, how about Cody's massive cut that he has in his head? That's gonna ruin those pretty boy looks of his.
That's left a scar and a half, isn't it? Oh. But one theory that I've got about the ring, and I'm not going to take full credit for this. I did see something similar to this online the other day, but essentially this could potentially be Cody's opportunity or pathway back into a world title contender contention in the future, because he might wrestle MJF with the ring on the line, and one of the many advantages the ring might have is possibly to grant the owner a world title shot, similar to having a Money in the Bank briefcase, for example. And this could be one way that Cody could fall into potentially being in contention for the world championship somewhere down the line, of course. And obviously that story has not even been announced or fleshed out at all, but that's one possibility.
They did bring up the fact that this was going to be an annual thing, so maybe this one was just to establish the ring, and nothing really much will come out of it. But maybe, next year they might add the caveat of the winner of the ring will also receive a AEW title match, and then as you say, that's the way that Cody could get into this and be like, this is my only way to get another title match, is by winning the Battle Royal and then defeating the other person in the Battle Royal to win the ring, and then challenge for the belt that way. But as you say, like that's something that they can do like down the road, and so like leave it till next year, and then that gives Cody like a whole year of not challenging for the belt, so it feels like it is a really long time since he's challenged for the belt again, and that will make the story that much more compelling overall.
Yeah, but this was a good fun match. Towards the end of the match, Adam Page should have had the match won after dropping MJF with the buckshot lariat, only for Wardlow to get involved. He draped MJF's foot across the rope to stop the 3 count, of course. Then the referee's back is turned for a second time in this match, allowing Wardlow to connect or to drop Adam Page with a wicked right hand, allowing MJF to pin Page after his own version of the Crossroads, just to rub a little salt into those wounds or to that scar in Cody's forehead. After the match, DDP, WWE Hall of Famer, of course, comes out to make the presentation of this very expensive diamond ring, and MJF to MJF, and instead of shaking DDP's hand, MJF just rather rudely puts his gum into DDP's hand. There's a bit of a face-off between DDP and Wardlow, which ends up in a brawl, which is broken up by officials. And personally, I thought that the brawl at the end between the face-off between DDP and Wardlow was just as entertaining as the match. Not that the match was bad at all, but I thought that was a really good way to end this segment. But the match, MJF, Adam Page, and then the segment at the end with DDP having a square off with Wardlow. What were your thoughts on what went down here then?
I'm quite surprised that the match didn't seem to be too long.
No.
Considering it was meant to be for this illustrious ring, so I thought it would have been built up to be a bit longer, but unless maybe they were running short on time or something, I'm not entirely sure, but it was a good little match, and the fact that DDP is 63 years old, it baffles me.
He still looks amazing.
Yeah.
Apparently he does a lot of yoga.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't heard, but apparently he's into yoga.
Oh.
But that must do the trick.
Must do, yeah. Not a fan of yoga myself. The only kind of yoga I do is bending down to pick up the remote after I've dropped it.
Yes, well, I've got children for that, so I'll get them to pick up the remote for me. Then we see another Rhodes. We see an in-ring interview with Dustin Rhodes. That was until he got sneak attacked from Sammy Guevara and the rest of the Inner Circle. However, Matt and Nick Jackson rushed to make the save, and the segment comes to an end with the good guys getting the better of Guevara, Santana, and Ortiz. And this sets up a nice 6-man tag match that was announced during the show for next week's Dynamite. So that'll be a hell of a match. And then moving on to our main event then. Scorpio Sky, who's kind of he's fallen into this match against Chris Jericho, having beaten or pinned Chris Jericho in a tag match when Chris was teaming with Sammy Guevara, and Scorpio Sky with Frankie Kazarian from a couple of weeks ago. And this was a really good match for the time that it had. Jericho caught Scorpio Sky off the ropes with the walls of Jericho, which Sky was able to escape from by reaching the bottom rope. Sky drops Le Champion with a cutter before executing a submission of his own. Then Jake Hager races down to interfere, but Scorpio Sky knocks him clean off the ring apron. Then Kazarian and Daniels come out to prevent any further interference from Hager, and Jericho goes to use the title belt, only for Scorpio Sky to avoid the move to drop Jericho with another close near fall. There's a leaping top rope Hurricane Rana from Scorpio Sky, so leaping from the canvas, getting Jericho while he's sat on the top turnbuckle with a Hurricane Rana, gets a 2 count from that attempt. Jericho countered Sky with a code breaker for a 2 count of his own. Jericho ends the match in rather prompt fashion by turning Scorpio Sky over for a second Lion Tamer, with Scorpio Sky tapping out almost instantly. And the end of the show, or the closing segment to this show, gives us Jon Moxley entering the arena to a huge ovation from the fans, with a bit of a stare down from a distance, albeit between Moxley and Jericho as the show goes off air. So we had Scorpio Sky and Chris Jericho in a championship match, and like I say, a rather prompt ending to that match. Maybe they were running out of time, although they did promise a 60-minute match and it would continue on YouTube if it did continue. But Scorpio Sky tapped out to the Lion Tamer, and then we had a bit of a stare off from a distance between Jon Moxley and Chris Jericho. So an awesome way to cap off this week's episode of Dynamite. But I'd love to know your take on it.
Absolutely. There seems to be around some of the other wrestling podcasts I listen to as well, there's a lot of people that are very skeptical on Jericho versus Moxley because of the feud that they had in WWE and how that didn't exactly go very great. But I almost feel as if that was kind of much less motivated Jericho and Moxley than they are now. And I'm starting to think now, whenever the title match happens is probably the first question. I'm assuming it might maybe happen on the first AEW of the new year, because they're building that up as quite a big show, because it's their homecoming show.
Yeah.
Or they're doing Jericho's Cruise. I don't know if that's meant to be built as a big show, but I'm potentially looking forward to this match between the two of them, to see what they can do with a lot less shackles on them in AEW.
Yeah. Exactly, and I think that the shackles will be off, and that will be a big difference between this and their feud in WWE. And if I remember, there was a potted plant involved. There was a Dean Ambrose asylum cage as well, with all sorts of weird and wonderful weapons attached to the side of the cage, and it was a big letdown, to be honest with you. But this one, I think they've reinvented themselves since they left WWE, and Chris Jericho is always on a journey of reinvention, and I think this current incarnation of Jericho is probably the best ever, in my opinion. Certainly the one that's kind of caught my attention the most out of all of his versions of Chris Jericho. Love what he's doing now, and the same for Jon Moxley. And I think that when they do meet, it will it will cast a massive shadow over anything they did previously in WWE, because I think that these are two wrestlers in a different zone, with the shackles off, with a lot more freedom. And it looks like, and one thing that confused me was Jon Moxley as a babyface. I think he's kind of always been a babyface because people have cheered him an awful lot, but he's always portrayed himself as a heel. But now against Jericho, I suppose he's positioning himself more as a tweener or maybe a baby face, but I think the dynamic works, and I don't think it's going to alter or change Jon Moxley's style or persona. Any kind of closing thoughts on AEW Dynamite before we move on then, Grizz?
There was one that during the Dustin promo and the brawl that happened, there was that microphone that was lying in the middle of the ring that really unnerved me, because everybody seemed to almost get slammed on it. And then even at one point, when the Bucks threw a super kick, I think it was Matt Jackson, when he brought his leg back down, kind of stood on the microphone and kind of stumbled, almost tripping over it. And it was just one of those things where it's when it comes to brawls after an interview, when they drop mics and start doing moves to each other, it's really unnerving, just waiting for someone to land on a microphone. Yeah,
I hadn't spotted that, but I might go back and watch it, because I'm the same. If there's anything like say like a microphone, for example, in the middle of the ring, you know that somebody is kind of dying to use it as a weapon or to slam somebody on it, but it leaves you with a feeling of uncomfortability. But so what we'll do now then, Grizz, is we'll talk through the categories for the Wrestling with Johners Pro Wrestling End of Year Awards. Now, obviously, the voting goes live today, fairly soon, as a matter of fact, and this is the formal announcement of all 25 categories. So originally, the list of categories was a bit longer, then I narrowed them down, but the way I've seen it is there's something for everything in this list of awards. And I've also added in quite a few because this is the final month or so of 2019, the final month of the decade. So there's a few decade awards in there as well. So I'll go through them, and this is in the order that you can kind of vote on them on the survey, which I will kind of give the website address to very, very soon. But the first award that people can vote for is, of course, Newcomer of the Year or Breakout Star of the New Year. The second award is Announcer of the Year. Then we've got Faction or Stable of the Year. Award number 4 is going to be Indie Promotion of the Year, followed by Indie Wrestler of the Year, and then at number 6 is going to be the biggest letdown match of the year. So one that was kind of hyped up. You might think of maybe Seth Rollins and the Fiend at Hell in a Cell, which really felt like a lead balloon in the end. And then most underrated match of the year, Angle/Storyline of the Year, Worst Wrestler of the Year, Worst Match of the Year, and Babyface and Heel of the Year. Biggest Shock or Moment of the Year is another award. Most Improved Wrestler, Comeback of the Year, and they're going into our Decade Awards. So we've got Show of the Decade from 2010 through to 2019, Match of the Decade from 2010 through to 2019, and Wrestler of the Decade from 2010 through to 2019. And then on to our big awards to cap off the awards. We got Brightest Prospects for 2020, so who will be the biggest breakout star of next year. Wrestling Promotion of 2019, Tag Team of the Year, Show of the Year or Show/Pay-Per-View of the Year, Match of the Year, Wrestler of the Year for women, and Wrestler of the Year for men. So 25 awards there. I went through it and I used a survey and voted myself. It took under 10 minutes, but it was good fun going through it all and jogging your memory bank as far as what really caught your attention in 2019. And even thinking further back, like I say, the Decade Awards are there for you to think about who's really stood out over the last 9 or 10 years. So some interesting awards there. But any kind of award categories there, Grizz, that jumped out at you that you might be voting on when the awards go live later on today?
Worst Wrestler of the Year, Jinder Mahal.
Well, yes, he'll be getting your votes, no doubt. But so voting goes live, and the link to the survey where you can put your cast your votes will, of course, be attached to this podcast or any of my social media posts, and probably be pinned to the top of my Twitter and Facebook page, of course. But you can find the voting form at surveyhero.com/C/2A251FB8. So I'll probably need to change the end of that to WWJ Pod Awards or something like that. But it is what it is at the moment. I don't expect you to read it. Just click on it and complete the vote. So
that's catchy.
There we go. Well, I think so. I might just add a 2 to the end of it for next year and a 3 for the following year. So, there we go. But there we go. The link to that will be attached to this podcast and all of our social media links, and it'll be pinned to the top of those pages. So let's have a look at this week's NXT. So we've had a really good chat about AEW. Let's have a chat about their kind of primary competition in the Wednesday Night Wars, of course, NXT. So this week's NXT starts with a bit of a recap from Saturday's TakeOver War Games. Full review of that, of course, is available in the archives. So I covered it with Liam from 5 Stars in the Tokyo Dome podcast, and that's there for you to listen. This week's show, it started with a bit of a celebration inside Full Sail to celebrate not only the fantastic TakeOver, but a tremendous Survivor Series where the Black and Gold brand came out victorious, you could say, over Raw and over SmackDown with 4 wins against 1 and 1. The celebration gets cut short, however, by Adam Cole and the Undisputed Era, who told everyone that the only reason NXT was successful was because of the Undisputed Era themselves. Tommaso Ciampa, Keith Lee, Matt Riddle, and Dominik Dijakovic are in the ring. Listen to all of this go down, with Ciampa not sounding too impressed with the verbiage coming out of NXT champion Adam Cole, and says that for four boys who had their asses whooped at War Games, they sure do seem confident. Tommaso says that War Games was just a beginning of the end for the Undisputed Era, and tonight the collapse continues with Keith Lee and Dominik Dijakovic taking the tag team title. So big words there from Tommaso. Ciampa then tells Roddy Strong that his days as North American champion are numbered also. Tommaso then addresses the NXT championship belt, Goldie, as he so fondly likes to refer to it as, and says that Daddy had to go to war, but the war is over and he's coming after Adam Cole's championship. And just then we get Finn Balor, who walks straight through Undisputed Era on the ramp. Tommaso challenges Finn Balor to a match on tonight's show, and then that leads to our opening match as Keith Lee tells Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly to get in the ring as they're about to kick things off with the tag team title match on the line there and then. So a big match to kick off the show, but hell of a segment. Lots of promo work from the Undisputed Era, Tommaso Ciampa and all the others getting involved on the mic. Finn Balor coming out towards the end there. What was your take on this opening segment then, Grizz?
Well, I liked how it started with the big party with the whole roster coming out and the rapper singing a little song, because it's I always love, like, in these like big what's the word, like the big crowds of like wrestlers to try and sort of pinpoint some people that you don't see very often, because I noticed that Shotzi Blackheart like technically made her NXT debut in this segment.
You can't miss her, can you?
No, because she's absolutely gorgeous and I love her.
I was referring to the green hair, but yeah, she is gorgeous as well.
I mean, probably the green hair is part of the reason why I have such a massive crush.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And also the return of Kushida and a fedora.
I did not spot that.
I noticed the fedora, and then I noticed who was in the fedora, and I was like, oh, brilliant.
Well, because I know he's out with a broken wrist or a broken hand at the moment, or I think he suffered that at the hands of Walter in their match from a few weeks ago. But hopefully we'll see him back fairly soon. He is greatly missed, and I don't think he's really hit his stride yet on NXT. So it'd be good to see what he can provide in 2020. But quite a fun opening segment. That did lead us into our opening match, though, Grizz, and it was for the Tag Team Championships and Undisputed Era versus Keith Lee and Dominik Dijakovic. Keith Lee, that is, starts this match off really strong with a huge leapfrog over both Fish and O'Reilly before gorilla pressing Bobby Fish out of the ring. So this is an interesting turn of events where we are told when they came back from commercials that Bobby Fish cannot continue with this match and is immediately replaced by fellow UE member Roderick Strong as the match continues. It appears that Fish was injured from being thrown over the ring by Keith Lee and landing awkwardly on his knee, although there's a bit of conjecture as to whether it was a potential reoccurrence of his knee injury or maybe a concussion. That's waiting to be confirmed. We then see Dijakovic perform a powerbomb on O'Reilly and a choke slam on Roderick Strong, getting a 2 count on Kyle O'Reilly. Keith Lee then has O'Reilly up in a spirit bomb on the outside. This time, however, Strong interferes with a chop block, taking Keith Lee down and preventing the move. Dijakovic turns the tide with an outstanding springboard senton from the middle rope to the outside on Strong and O'Reilly. Then, in a really kind of holy shit moment, Adam Cole comes down the rampway, but is launched into the fans with a gigantic pounce by Keith Lee over the guard railings into the first 3 rows. Then poor and unfortunate fans. I think it's kind of broken the internet with the GIF and the meme that of Keith Lee launching Adam Cole into the stratosphere, really. But you must have been kind of abused, or I don't know, did you jump out your seat when you saw that? What were your thoughts when Keith Lee performed that pounce on Adam Cole?
It almost looked like he didn't mean to do it.
I don't think he realised how light or how easy it was for him to pounce Adam Cole, to be honest with you. He certainly went flying.
Because when I seen it, I was trying to figure out if the fans that were in those seats might have been plants that knew how to catch him. But looking back at it and the way that he kind of landed, I don't think I don't think that was the case.
Well, I'd like to think they were plants, because otherwise there could be a compensation being owed to anybody that might have been injured. But yes, that was a pretty holy shit moment. Dominik Dijakovic looks on at what had just occurred on the outside, perfectly setting up O'Reilly and Strong to execute their high-low finisher for the 1-2-3, as Undisputed successfully defend their championships in this action-packed and dramatic opening match. So we didn't get new champions, but we did get our Keith Lee, of course, who set himself up big time. He made a huge superstar of himself at War Games and especially Survivor Series over the past weekend, and has possibly set himself up also as a contender, or a possible contender, to Adam Cole's championship, certainly after that pounce. Now, there's a lot of people that are throwing their hats or names into the ring, possibly vying for Adam Cole's championship. We'll talk more about that later on. But do you think Keith Lee has possibly made himself a contender for Goldie or the championship after Wednesday night?
Well, definitely after the kind of week that he's had. I do want to kind of like throw a bit of criticism on the end of this match, though, because where was Keith Lee during the pinfall? Like, on commentary, they tried to say, like, oh, Keith Lee was just in awe of his strength, what he'd done to Adam Cole, that he couldn't break up the 3 count. And it's like, I don't know, I don't feel like that's a good enough excuse.
Yeah.
But
no, I hadn't thought of that.
That's the only thing that's kind of slightly put a damper on what was a great match. Yeah. Because unless we missed it, and after the high-low was hit, whichever one it was of the Undisputed Era that didn't get the pin tried to play defense and blocked him from getting in the ring, and we just didn't notice. And the fact that Roddy Strong came in at literally a moment's notice and was able to hold this match together, it just shows like the absolute talent that dude has.
Yeah, most definitely. He's a pro through and through. And I think he is one of them versatile players that you can throw in at zero notice and get a great performance from. And I think that certainly when he's combining with Kyle O'Reilly, they were the tag team champions together from a while ago. And then, of course, you've got 2 ultra pros in the shape of Keith Lee and Dominik Dijakovic that I don't think they probably said a word to each other while they were just doing that match, and it just happened naturally, organically, as you would expect from 4 excellent wrestlers. But that led us straight into our next match, and it was Shane Thorne versus Mansoor. So now we've all seen the rise of Mansoor throughout 2019. He definitely has made his mark, especially with that Battle Royal win in Saudi Arabia from June. Then, of course, his win over Cesaro at Crown Jewel from last month. But this is the first time we've seen him in a long time, certainly in an NXT ring. This match was also very fast-paced, with Mansoor taking a risky dive to the outside, only to be caught by Shane Thorne, dropping Mansoor with a backdrop driver on the floor on the outside. We see another high-angled backdrop driver from Thorne getting a 2 count inside the ring. Mansoor attempts a second dive through the ropes on Thorne, this time connecting successfully, perfectly setting up Mansoor with a slingshot net breaker for the pinfall victory over Shane Thorne. So just your quick thoughts on this match. And one thing that's always, when Shane Thorne makes his entrance, unless they got his name at the bottom half of the screen, I can never remember his name. And I don't know if it's because he's quite a forgettable wrestler in general, but he's one of them wrestlers that doesn't really kind of stand out to me in any way, shape or form. And when he's in the ring, he's fairly good. He's got some good moves. I remember he had a good match with Johnny Gargano not too long ago. But he's not a very memorable wrestler. And I think his position within NXT is exactly this, potentially putting over people like Mansoor. But what's your thoughts on this match and my comments on Shane Thorne, maybe?
Absolutely agree with you. One of the things, I'm quite the wrestling theme snob, and this new theme song that Shane Thorne has is absolute killer in terms of it's a killer to the character. Because you're right, like Shane Thorne isn't exactly the most memorable wrestler in the world. And I thought that he should have kept the Mighty's theme song after Nick Miller left. And yeah, it does seem now as if he's literally just been used as a kind of job guy, whereas before TM61 or the Mighty, were starting to get fairly prominent, and it is kind of a shame that his tag partner left, considering the two of them made like pretty much most of their career was them as a tag team. So now them splitting up and Nick Miller being in New Japan now, it sounds as if he's doing pretty well, and Shane Thorne decided to kind of stay in NXT, and it just doesn't seem to be going as well for him. But on the flip side of that, like Mansoor is, I really like this kid, and I'm quite excited to see what he brings in the future when he just gets that little bit more polished in terms of his wrestling sort of skills and everything.
Yeah.
And I reckon like he could probably make a good run at maybe the cruiserweight title or something down the line. Because I think him versus Leo Rush has potential to be a barn burner.
Yeah, and he delivered a pretty good promo after his win against Cesaro at Crown Jewel, so he can definitely deliver on the mic as well. But I've got a feeling that they'll use him sparingly on NXT and then kind of wheel him out every time they go to Saudi Arabia for that hometown pop. But yeah, he is a very good wrestler, and I think he's really come into prominence this year especially, he's pretty good in the ring, so I'd say use him a bit more, but he's definitely a talent. And then we get a grudge match of sorts, Candice LeRae versus Dakota Kai. And we see the entrance and the new look, the new entrance music and the new attitude from Dakota Kai after her heel turn on Tegan Nox on Saturday night. She's even carrying Tegan's knee brace to the ring as a bit of a memento. The match is wow, it's kind of full on, to be honest with you. It really is one of those matches you have to go out and see. But Candice goes for broke with a huge dive onto Dakota on the outside before getting a 2 count from a back senton. Dakota then spins Candice kind of around in a full circle into the ring post. And that was quite a unique and novel move that looked quite painful. Then there's a scary spot where Dakota landing quite awkwardly from a roughly executed German suplex on the ring apron from Candice. Candice then gets a 2 count from a tornado DDT. LeRae misses her moonsault, setting up Dakota for her chiropractor move on Candice for another 2 count. Dakota connects with a shot to the head of Lorraine with the knee brace. So she uses the knee brace that she brings down to the ring as a weapon and caused a disqualification for herself, giving the win, of course, to Candice LeRae through disqualification. Dakota launches LeRae against the ring steps before going for a steel chair, and just as she's about to use the steel chair against her opponent, Candice LeRae, out comes Rhea Ripley, of course, the star of the moment. She makes the save to send Dakota packing. So a really fun match. I like the action. I mean, both Dakota and Candice LeRae fought around the ring, so the action went to the outside. There was some good action on the inside of the ring, some close near falls, a disqualification win for Candice LeRae through the leg brace, and then Rhea Ripley coming down towards the end. So it pretty much had some good action, some good drama, and a good story to it as well. But what were your thoughts on how this went down then, Grizz?
I absolutely love the new Dakota Kai.
Same here.
It's just something so simple, like changing a wrestler's theme music when they turn heel or face. And this was kind of one of these things that I couldn't take seriously about Sasha Banks when she turned heel and still just came out with the same music. Granted, it's changed now and it definitely has helped elevate the character, but just with the way that NXT do it so quickly, it's just very, kind of admirable that they just have that little bit more attention to detail when it comes to stuff like that. And I feel like Dakota should constantly come out with this knee brace and just have that be her kind of a gimmick or whatever until Tegan comes back. Because I'm gonna assume that maybe Tegan might be off TV for a couple of weeks to sell the injury, because it did look pretty brutal, let's face it. And then, it'll finally get to the point where Dakota and Tegan will have their match, and then Tegan with the victory, and then she could reclaim her knee brace off Dakota. Or if you really want to go that one step further, have it in a ladder match.
Well, yeah, that would be a really good match. But I think when the two of them, Dakota Kai and Tegan Nox, do get in the ring, I think that's going to be a battle. That really is. But when that will happen, not sure. I think the next NXT takeover is not advertised until the 16th of February. Now, they do have a Worlds Collide show pitting superstars from NXT and NXT UK going to battle on the Saturday over Royal Rumble weekend. But I don't know whether that will be. I mean, potentially this would be a big enough match to have on an episode of NXT. It would certainly put a bit of a spike in the ratings, but I can't wait for that one to happen. But yes, I think Tegan's going to be out, as you rightly said, for a couple of weeks to sell the injury. I love the new Dakota Kai. I love her look, the music as well, the attitude, the knee brace. Yeah, just think that's a really good package for her. And where we were talking earlier about Bayley's heel turn, which isn't clicking, this one definitely has. And in the vein of Io Shirai and her heel turn, which is 100% working, I think this one is doing the trick as well. And maybe that's the difference between kind of how the stars are developed NXT as opposed to how they're developed when you get to the main roster, you could say. Where there's a bit more thought and a bit more creativity put into these characters. But there we go. And then we get to an NXT Cruiserweight Championship match, Akira Tozawa versus Lio Rush. And of course, Akira was one of the three in the kickoff show Cruiserweight Championship match. Of course, it was Akira Tozawa, Lio Rush, and who was the third? I can't remember. One of the Lucha House Party, Kalisto, of course. Another one of those, like Shane Thorne, not very memorable. But there was a senton spot from Tozawa crushing Leo's chest against the ring apron on the outside, and that looked pretty painful. There was a holy shit moment when Tozawa sends Lio crashing off the side of the ring with a brutal German suplex spot, with both men just beating the referee's 10 counts. Lio misses his slingshot cutter as Tozawa falls to the canvas. Tozawa gets a very close near fall from a bridging German suplex with Lio. Lio is quick to react, bringing up his knees to block Tozawa's top rope senton, however, and Lio then executes two consecutive final hour frog splashes, covering and getting the 1, 2, 3 to win the match and to retain his championship. And this was a really good match. It was so much better than the Cruiserweight match on the kickoff for Survivor Series on Sunday. Really drama filled. It was hard hitting, and it made the triple threat of Survivor Series look like child's play, or at least that's what I've got down here in my notes. And it was one of the better Cruiserweight matches I've seen from WWE in a long time. So Lio Rush versus Akira Tozawa, and similar to when we've seen other quote-unquote main roster stars go back to NXT. We mentioned earlier how, people tend to revel in NXT. They have the shackles off. They really enjoy being there in front of the Full Sail crowd, which is a very appreciative crowd, as we know. And they do seem to kind of wrestle with a bit more freedom. And Akira Tozawa certainly seemed to be wrestling with a bit more freedom here in this match.
Yeah, absolutely. Considering that Tozawa's kind of only been used on Raw recently as enhancement talent, which is a damn shame because Tozawa is arguably one of my favorite wrestlers that's in WWE right now. I don't know why I get so excited every time I hear that dumb little theme music it has hit, and the fact that while I was kind of taking a few notes to talk about it, and his theme song hit, and I was like, I'm so chuffed that I get to talk about Tozawa, just because I like to gush on how much I love the guy.
Yeah. I love his music as well. It's very reminiscent of the Kill Bill music. Tozawa's entrance music. I absolutely love it. It's very reminiscent of that, and it certainly kind of sets you up for an exciting match whenever Tozawa's on our screens. But any final thoughts on Tozawa versus Lio Rush?
Yep, I agree with you. It was an excellent match between the two of them, and just like the little things that Lio Rush does that just shows why he's such an incredible talent. And considering he's so young as well, is nuts. Like the dude has a long career ahead of him as long as he can stay healthy. But just little things like see when he does that thing where he runs off the ropes, and then as he starts to run back towards his opponent, he kind of just stops and turns on a dime and then bounces off the other rope.
Yeah, that's you don't see that from many wrestlers. That's quite unique.
Yeah, and it's I would imagine that's quite hard to do because you've got momentum going in one direction and then you're just like, nope, other direction. And as you brought up during your rundown, I really quite like that spot where Leo Rush went for his springboard stunner, and Tozawa just wasn't there. It made the match look more real, for lack of a better word, in the way that, like, he took a risk by going for that move, and Tozawa just wasn't there, and so he kind of crashed and burned and landed, hit the mat quite hard from that, and it was just a nice little added touch, and I don't know if that was maybe deliberate or if Tozawa just wasn't in position or whatever, but whatever it was, I kind of like really liked it for what it was.
Yeah, it really works, didn't it? And it did add that aura of reality, you could say. I really enjoyed that spot. I picked that one out as well. I enjoyed that. But something you don't often see, because quite often you see the wrestlers foolishly run into moves, where on this occasion Tozawa was just too exhausted. But then we get a super quick match between Xia Li and Vanessa Vaughn, with Xia Li disposing of Vaughn after a power bomb, then a spin kick to the head. After the match, Shayna Baszler and the Horsewomen come out to they come out to attack Xia Li, with Shayna and co pulling Lee to pieces as the champ gets on the mic to tell us that no one had the weekend like she did. She beat SmackDown Women's Champion Bayley and Raw Women's Champion Becky Lynch, and she did it all at the same time. Shayna tells us that without her, there would be nothing to celebrate. But before Shayna could continue, Rhea Ripley, the girl of the hour, she made an appearance, a second appearance of the night, as a matter of fact, causing Baszler and co to exit the ring, and Leah tells Shayna congratulations on her wins against Becky and Bayley. But when she goes face to face with her, when she went face to face with her, she beat her. So they have had an exchange before, and she'll do it again. But next time it will be for the NXT Championship. So the match between Xia Li and Vanessa Vaughn was over in a flash. But it was the confrontation afterwards, and another face to face confrontation between Shayna Baszler and Rhea Ripley. I mean, Rhea Ripley's had the week that only kind of you can imagine in dreams, to be honest with you. Certainly with a pinfall victory over Charlotte Flair on Friday, successful War Games match on Saturday, and then successful in the Survivor Series match on Sunday, and then on Wednesday kind of going on face to face and really putting her marker on things as far as the NXT Women's Championship is concerned. And she's the definite number one contender as far as I'm concerned. It'll be a match that I can't wait to see. But what about yourself, Grizz?
Can you do me a favor real quick?
Mm.
Can you just tell me that result from Friday one more time?
What, against Charlotte Flair?
Mm-hmm.
When she pinned Charlotte Flair? Yeah.
Thank you.
That's the one. And does that make you happy?
Oh, that makes me so happy. I just really wanted to hear that just one more time, just to really let it sink in.
But then 3 days back to back were just phenomenal for Rhea Ripley, and she is the star that they're strapping a rocket to, and she is off to the moon. So she is the star that they are putting all their bucks behind, by the looks of it.
Well, it's really interesting when you think about it in the long term, because she's already held the NXT UK Women's Championship. She's now obviously entering a program with Shayna Baszler for the NXT American Women's Championship.
Yeah.
And considering she's so young, and she's only 24 years old.
Yeah, if that, she might still be 23, but yeah, she's very young. Yeah.
Yeah. But considering how many years she has ahead of her, she could ideally become the ultimate grand champion in a couple of years. If she beats Shayna for the belt, which I really, really hope that they do, because I don't mind Shayna, but I am so bored of her with that belt.
Yeah, true.
And so, like, with all these years ahead of her, like, there's a chance that Rhea could end up potentially becoming future Raw and or SmackDown Women's Champion, and then maybe even holding the tag titles at some point, and she could literally become the ultimate Grand Slam champion, because she's held the NXT UK title as well.
That's right. And I think she's ahead in the stakes as far as I don't think Toni Storm, she's got a lot of backing from the WWE management, but I think Rhea Ripley, she's going to be winning them championships before Toni Storm will, most definitely. I think Rhea Ripley's got a few more advantages over Toni Storm, for example. She's got more of a character, better presence in the ring, and better on the microphone as well. As much as I love Toni Storm, I just don't think she's quite the half the package that she needs to be yet.
Yeah, see, I would say that it definitely seems as if they're starting to cool off a little bit on Toni Storm, because she has not been very prominent as of late on any product, really. In fact, Survivor Series was probably the first time in forever that we seen Toni Storm. Well,
since Takeover Cardiff.
Yeah. Well, sorry, she was actually on that SmackDown before Survivor Series, but you get what I'm saying. It's been a while since we've seen her, and it appears that she's ready to go, unless she's just going to start showing up at the next NXT UK tapings and ready to go there and see what happens there in the future. But it does seem as if like they kind of put all their eggs in the Toni Storm basket when, you know, she won the second Mae Young Classic and all that, and then she won the belt and she kind of lost it to Kaylee Ray in a match that was a bit disappointing.
Yeah,
considering the talent that's involved. And it just, I don't know, it just seems as if they've kind of taken their foot off the pedal when it comes to Toni Storm a little. Maybe they're just kind of giving her more time to maybe try and find a better character or something like that. But I mean, Toni Storm is also super young, so there's absolutely no rush.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I'm a massive fan of Toni Storm. I just think that she's not quite delivered in one or two of the areas when she was so highly touted and pushed quite heavily to start off with. I think when you look at Rhea Ripley, that's where Toni Storm should be, but Rhea Ripley's kind of got there quicker. So we shall see. Let's have a look at this very, very exciting main event that was set up at the beginning of the show. Tommaso Ciampa going up against the Prince, Finn Bálor, of course. Now, in this match, just some of the highlights from the many highlights. Bálor delivers a sling blade and a clothesline, sending Ciampa to the outside before crashing Ciampa into the railings with a John Woo dropkick. Ciampa manages to reverse a 1916 DDT into an air raid crash on the floor, with both wrestlers managing to just beat the 10 count of the referee. Ciampa gets a close near fall from a Project Ciampa to "This is awesome" chants from the fans. Bálor delivers another John Woo kick, but Ciampa is somehow able to deliver a second air raid crash from the middle turnbuckle for a very close near fall. Ciampa then looks to end the match when Adam Cole comes back out to interfere again, only to get knocked off the ring. Bálor drops Ciampa with an inverted DDT onto the NXT Championship belt, but only manages to get a 2 count. Cole then gets back up to connect with an enziguri to the side of Ciampa's head, allowing Bálor to hook the head for the 1916 DDT, hooking the leg and getting the 1-2-3 over Ciampa. So after the match, another big talking point, Adam Cole and Bálor, they stand over the body of the fallen Ciampa after the pinfall loss. Cole does his UE hand signal. Bálor pulls out the Bullet Club double guns. Adam Cole then slaps Bálor on the back as if to say, we're together now, we're friends, we're buddies. But the Prince drops the NXT champion with an overhead kick, bringing an end to this segment, bringing an end to this show, and leaving us all wondering exactly where Finn Bálor's allegiances lie. So first of all, give us your thoughts on this excellent match between Finn Bálor and Tommaso Ciampa. A bit of a dream match of sorts, and then what occurred afterwards. Grizz.
That was literally the first thing I was going to say. Was you talk about dream matches? This was kind of one of these ones where, you know, you sometimes don't realize you want a match until you're given it, and then you're like, I didn't realize that I wanted this my entire life until right now.
Yeah.
Also, other matches like that include Hornswoggle versus Scott Steiner from WrestleMania weekend.
Now you're talking.
Yeah, but it was awesome stuff. Tommaso Ciampa, I think, is on a complete other level. And this story with him obviously never losing the NXT title just makes it that more interesting. And personally, like, when he goes up against Adam Cole eventually, because there seems to be so many people wanting a shot at the belt right now, I think Adam Cole should keep the belt for a bit and then, like, let let Ciampa stew a little more and really build it up. And Finn Balor, I think, has been on another level ever since he turned heel. And I'm also kind of glad that they've finally given us the answer to is there an allegiance, is there not an allegiance when it comes to Balor and the Undisputed Era? Because it seemed as if there was for a bit, or like a somewhat understanding, and there's been more than one time where we've all kind of sat there and gone, don't throw up the UE symbol, Finn, don't, and then he hasn't, he does the gun thing, and you're like, right, okay, because Finn does not need to be part of the Undisputed Era to be over.
No, definitely not. I think his heel turn has been another revelation, to be honest with you. And as we said before, if this heel turn would have happened on WWE, on the main roster, Raw or SmackDown, I don't think it would have been half as effective. And he's getting quite a bit of license to do and say and look how he does in the ring. And a fantastic main event, and a dream match that we saw on Wednesday night. But overall thoughts on this week's NXT, and the $64,000 question, almost as expensive as the ring that MJF now owns. What would you say was the best show of the week, or the better show of the two that we've just described?
See, that's a tough one this week. But I think overall I would have to go with AEW.
Because?
Well, considering that opening segment was absolutely everything I love about Chris Jericho, just being hilarious, a great main event, interesting other matches, like the women's tag match, Kenny Omega versus Pac, and even like, Best Friends versus the Lucha Bros was a great little match. And the only sort of criticism that I will take away from NXT is I do feel like they should have maybe tried to have built even. There we go. Built the match more between Finn and Ciampa, like going into the show instead of announcing it on the show, because that might have maybe grabbed another couple of eyes to the product if you announced that in advance.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, and like I say, they seem to be squabbling over ratings or picking bones over ratings, certainly after NXT won the first 8 weeks last week, and coming off the back of a very hot takeover weekend, Survivor Series, you would expect them to have the upper hand, but they could have had even more of an upper hand, as you rightly said, had they've announced that main event ahead of time. But it all leads into the storyline, it all leads into kind of the angle, but now we've got a handful of people potentially vying for Adam Cole's NXT Championship. We've obviously got Finn Balor now thrown into the mix. You got Tommaso Ciampa, potentially Keith Lee, maybe Johnny Gargano could be thrown into the mix when he's fit and well again. But we're a little way off from the next takeover, as I said. February the 16th is the next one, so a couple of months off. But kind of, how do you think this championship contention is going to play out? Who do you think is going to be the first one to challenge Adam Cole? Or could there be a multi-man match? What's your thoughts?
See, I kind of like the idea of it. It seems like there's 3 to 4 people right now, and I feel like this would make good television for them to have like kind of a mini tournament of some kind, just to really like kind of flesh out everybody. And it obviously, you kind of need television with 2 hours live every Wednesday night. So it'd be a good way to, instead of just announcing like Tommaso Ciampa is going to get the next title shot, like have him earn it, because he's always implied like, oh yeah, Goldie, I'm coming back for you and all that, but it's NXT, and William Regal, he doesn't just want to make things easy. No, definitely not. But with what I've just explained, and so many people vying for that piece of gold, it certainly makes me want to come back and tune in next week. It's certainly one of them angles and storylines and threads that's going to make me want to see what happens next. So there we go. But I have to watch next week's show because I'll be commentating about it on the podcast, of course. But that was another really fun week of AEW Dynamite, a really fun episode of NXT. So I think
we're definitely winners on that front. And I think wrestling fans in general are winners with the vast array of wrestling product that's available to them, and 2 excellent shows that they can kind of pick and choose and fight over and talk about regarding AEW and NXT. But Grizz, before we kind of say goodbye to you, we have the much hyped, the much aligned 2-minute brainbuster quiz. So I hope you can't check Wikipedia or Google for this, Grizz. These are going to be quick fire questions. I want quick fire answers, and this will be the start of a leaderboard that will comprise of other co-hosts and guest hosts as the weeks and the months progress, and essentially it will be the person who answers the most amount of questions correctly in 2 minutes will be top of the leaderboard, and that is exactly your aim, your goal for the next 2 minutes. So let's make sure I've got my stopwatch ready, and let me get my questions up. I hope I've got enough in front of me to if you answer these quickly, we might run out of questions, but hopefully not. So okay. Here we go. I will start the clock very, very shortly, and the first question will commence now. So, in which WWE pay-per-view did The Undertaker make his debut in 1990?
Survivor Series.
Which city in Louisiana hosted the 2014 and 2018 WrestleManias?
Oh, pass.
What number Wrestle Kingdom will take place in January next year?
15.
Who is the current IWGP World Heavyweight Champion?
Okada.
What is the name of Kenny Omega's finishing move?
The one-winged angel.
How many WWE United Kingdom champions have there been so far?
3.
For which MMA company did Jack Hager is currently
Bellator.
Undefeated in? Which wrestler from Essex is the current Progress Proteus champion?
Rampage Brown?
No. In which year did Hulk Hogan win his first WWF championship?
1988.
Who was Chris Jericho's tag team partner when he was one half of the Thrill Seekers?
Lance Storm.
In which year did WWE Hall of Famer Edge retire from professional wrestling?
2012.
In which WWE legend has won the most Royal Rumble matches?
Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Who is the current Impact World Champion?
Sami Callihan.
Which WWE women's wrestler has Batista been getting hot and steamy
Dana
with
Brooke.
over Twitter? And which venue hosted WrestleMania 1? Oh, we're out of time. We are out of time. So I got a chance to
Madison Square Garden.
Out of time, Grizz. But you got asked 14 questions, and by my reckoning, you got 9 of those correct. So let's go through some of them. So question 1, which pay-per-view show did The Undertaker make his debut? You correctly answered Survivor Series. Which city in Louisiana hosted the 2014 and 2018 WrestleManias? That was New Orleans, of course. I was there. Which number Wrestle Kingdom will take place in January next year? So it's Wrestle Kingdom 14 next year. So close.
Yes.
You got the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship correct. Okada, of course. Kenny Omega's finishing move, the one-winged angel. 3 United Kingdom champions, of course. Bellator, that's the MMA company that Jake Hager fights for. Which wrestler from Essex is the current Proteus champion? Oh crikey, I've not got the answer down here, but it's the little guy. Crikey, I'm gonna have to Google my own quiz here. Let's have a quick look. And
because as soon as I said Rampage Brown, I was like, oh no, he's from Leeds.
Yeah, let's have a look. Proteus champion. It's and he's one of my favorite wrestlers. I don't know why. Why is it not down here? I'll come back to this anyway. Let's go back to the ones. The This is live podcasting, folks. This is live podcasting.
It's absolute finest.
And it's absolute finest. In which year did Hulk Hogan win his first WWF Championship? It's 1984. I think you said 88.
Yeah.
Lance Storm, of course, Chris Jericho's partner in the Thrill Seekers back in Smoky Mountain days. Which year did WWE Hall of Famer Edge retire? I think you got that one wrong. The correct answer is 2011.
Yeah,
because it was straight after WrestleMania 27, of course. That was his final match before he retired the final night, or a few nights later on SmackDown. Which WWE legend was won the most amount of Royal Rumbles? Of course, Stone Cold Steve Austin. You got that right. Sami Callihan is the Impact World Champion, and of course Dana Brooke is getting into a hot and steamy Twitter exchange with Batista. So let me just check for my own sanity. The Paul Robinson, of course, and I should know that because he's one of my favourite wrestlers, and there's a picture of him staring at me through my laptop saying, John, why can't you remember my name? And if I ever get within 10 feet of him, he'll probably slap me. But there we go. So 9 correct questions. You're top of the leaderboard, Grizz. Well done.
Default.
Yes.
Default.
So at least for the next 7 days, you're top of the leaderboard. But I think 9 correct questions in 2 minutes is a good effort. So congratulations and well done.
Intense.
So did you enjoy that experience?
Yeah, it was intense, but a good kind of intense.
There we go. And I've tried to throw in a mixture of obvious and maybe not so obvious questions there. But Grizz, that brings us to the end of the Wrestling with Johners podcast, episode 83. And I'd love you to kind of give our listeners an opportunity to get in touch with you. If you have any plugs, any Twitter handles, any Facebook pages, anything you want to plug or throw out there to the wrestling world, where can my listeners of Wrestling with Johners podcast find you then, buddy?
Absolutely. Well, I'm still in the podcast game, just in a very different kind of subject these days, as I do a Robot Wars podcast with my friend Alan. It's called Rise of the Robots, and you can find that on pretty much anywhere that podcasts get podcasted. And you can follow us on the Twitter there at podcast ROTR. My personal Twitter, if anyone feels like sending us a tweet, because I don't really use it much, but mainly because I don't talk to people, is at Juggalo Grizz. And but please, like, if you've ever like remember Robot Wars from the olden days, then this is the show for you, because we've started at season 1 from all the way back in 1998, and we've went through the first 2 seasons of Robot Wars so far. We're then going to be covering some BattleBots from America, and it's going to be a long-winded journey through metal munching carnage.
I used to love Robot Wars back in the day. Just throw out the name of that podcast again one more time, Chris.
Sure, it's Rise of the Robots.
There we go. So everybody go and check that out. But Grizz, I want to thank you so much for being a guest host on the Wrestling with Johners podcast this week. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed the experience.
It's been great fun.
There we go. Well, I'm sure we'll have you back on sometime in the near future, most definitely, as far as I'm concerned. But we'll be back again next Saturday with our next recap of NXT and AEW Dynamite and all things good that have happened in the world of wrestling from the previous 7 days. But in the meantime, please keep it tuned to the Wrestling with Johners podcast for all of your weekly NXT and AEW updates, including regular WWE and AEW pay-per-view reviews and so much more. And if you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, please don't forget to spread the word. Tell your friends and tell your family. And don't forget to hit them ever important subscribe buttons so that you know when an episode of Wrestling with Johners drops on your favourite podcast platform, and so you don't miss out on a single episode, of course. But in the meantime, from myself and from Grizz, thank you very much for listening. Have yourself a great weekend and a great week. Catch up with you all again soon.